Welcome to The Spawn Chunks, episode number 353 for Monday, June 9th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available across all major podcast platforms, including a video version on YouTube and Spotify. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixelriffs, and joining me as always is Gorilla in the Kitchen, Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
That is an understatement, I would say. A bit more of a finesse person out in the barbecue, but in the kitchen, it's still brutal. I achieve success, but it's not always pretty. Certainly messy. I definitely have a lot to clean up afterwards. And if you'd like to hear about our kitchen adventures, our outdoor adventures, Pixelriff's adventures in the garden, slug snacks, and my, we'll say, revamped attempts to grow some herbs in my living room, then check out the Render Distance. It's the extended version of the program. We talked about what we were up to on the weekend. Most of it was outdoors because it's been nice, and as the summer weather has been coming in and barbecue season is upon us. We talk about all kinds of stuff every week, both in the pre and the post show. And that is available at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. It's available for the people that support us here on the podcast. You get extra 15 to 30 minutes of content every single week, as well as other benefits like hanging out for the monthly hangout. That's where we check in with our patrons to see what they've been up to in Minecraft. That's usually the last Saturday of the month. So for June, that's probably going to be on the 28th. So keep an eye out for that. We do also have a quarterly hangout, and we're a little bit behind on those because we're trying to get some data sorted out behind the scenes between Acast and Spotify. Still waiting back on some emails there. So that is coming up. So stay tuned in the Discord for when we schedule the quarterly. And that's where Pixelriffs and I talk about the downloads, the YouTube numbers, how the show's doing, Patreon, what our plans are for the future, that kind of stuff. And if you're interested in this particular episode, coming up, we have a conversation about Tricky Trials, a year in retrospective, as well as a question about Minecraft Earth, and a little bit closer to Chasing the Skies, as we have two pre-releases to talk about.
Yes, and now I've been doing a little bit of gardening in real life. You've been doing some farming in Minecraft. Tell us what's new on the Citadel this week, Joel.
So I finished an extra farmstead in the West Hill Valley. That was the one thing I did this week. And while it took a couple of streams, it is really nice to kind of fit it all in 1 week. I started Tuesday and I finished Saturday, and it's done. And so what we did was there's a point where the river bends near the top of the West Hill Valley in the north, right when you walk in. So it's one of the first things that you see when you're wandering down that path as you come into the area. And I decided it was going to be some sort of like fishing hut, fishing house. Ended up calling it a fishing farmstead because it ended up having a bit of everything. Like, it's got some back gardens, it's got a wharf and a fish drying rack, and it's got a little carved canoe, which I'm really proud of. And all these little things, like these little details, just kind of add life to it. When you don't have villagers roaming around your area because they're so hard to control, then you kind of have to add in these little bits of detail, as well as things like the firefly bushes, and getting into some of the new bush details as well. As I was doing the landscaping around the area, I was realizing that the bushes really do add a lot to the variety in the foliage. So if you're seeing an area that's got a lot of grass, and really the only options you have are like grass, ferns, and using leaf blocks for bushes, getting some of these new bush blocks in there next to grass, next to other bushes, is fantastic. And they work really well as crops. So if you're looking for a different way to show a kind of crop, they kind of look like a spinach or a leafy lettuce or something like that. So in the little raised beds in the garden behind the fishing farmstead, I put in my own beetroot texture. So that's the thing we've talked about before. But then I also put in carrots, and then I put in the bushes. And in context, next to other crops, they read as crops. And then just blocks away next to the house, you can put one next to the house and it looks like a bush. So they're really flexible, which I thought was really good. And really enjoyed the firefly bushes. They did not anticipate the sounds. Knew it was going to look cool, especially at night, and it does. But forgot that you're going to get that kind of buzzing and insect noise that you get from them.
Yeah,
and that's fantastic. Yeah, I think I may actually add a little bit more. I don't want more firefly bushes on the surface, but I might bury one or two just to kind of have more firefly effects. I was a little bit disappointed when I wanted to put them along the river and hopefully see them when you approach the area, because there's this spot when you come through the wooded path where you can see the fishing farmstead, the custom tree, and where you would see all the firefly bushes. You can see the bushes, but you're too far away for the fireflies to render in. So what I did was I put firefly bushes on that side of the river too, and kind
Hmm.
of like didn't hide them, but I kind of like tucked them behind some trees. So you still see the odd firefly and you still hear the noise, even though you're too far away from the other bank to really see it all. So it all came together quite nicely. I really like the level of detail, and uh, that area on the river has already been kind of like landscaped and has like submerged and waterlogged leaf blocks and things like that. So it's coming together pretty nicely, and I like. I have to say, like, I really enjoy the skills that I've picked up for landscaping. Like putting together a custom tree took a half a stream, like hour, maybe hour and a half tops. Um, Doing the road, same thing. That happened on the same stream. All the landscaping on the sides of the roads, like same stream. So having that kind of stuff kind of like in your holster, when you're ready to finish up these builds, it's such a nice skill to have, to take something from looking like it's plunked on a Minecraft plains biome to something that looks like it's been there for years, and so that's what I did in my week this week.
It's all looking great. I love the copper roof. I love a copper roof. So
Yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
going to be an easy win for me. But like, I think I really wish that more stuff like what you're doing with the armor stand posing items was
Me
available in vanilla
too.
Minecraft. Like the way you've just got a couple of fish hung up on a fence gate, and it looks really nice. Like it looks like the kind of thing that you'd imagine the average Minecraft player having to do with their fish if they wanted to like dry it out before cooking it or whatever, right? Like it's obviously mechanically so straightforward to remember, but it always feels strange fishing up a fish and then just immediately slapping it into a furnace that you're also using to cook like iron and coal and stuff like that. But like dry curing fish feels like more of a survival experience, and I think that's why people have done that with mods and having like drying racks to make jerky out of meat instead of having like the furnace as the only path to using that as food. And so I think it's really nice to be able to put in details like that, but it still remains such a shame that that's down to stuff players have to do themselves through armor stand books and posing mods and that kind of thing.
I went with the armor poser mod here for one specific reason, and that is it allows you to change the scale of the armor stands. And so when you look at the salmon and the cod that are hanging in the rack there, a couple of them are oversized, like
Mm,
1.2, 1.4. And again, like that kind of variety really kind of helps sell the idea.
yes.
And one of the things I like so much about the armor stand, either the data pack or the armor poser mod, depending on which one you're using, is that it just uses vanilla textures. Like you're not adding anything to the game that's created by other players. It's still a fish texture. It's still a cod or a salmon. It's still a fence gate. It's still a fishing rod, lying flat on the workbench. It's all vanilla textures. It's just that you're able to put them in places that you can't normally. And I think that it's such a shame, like you said, that this kind of capability isn't available in vanilla Minecraft, because all of those textures are in the game, and they're just meant to be inventory items, or potentially you can put them in item frames, but item frames are pretty limited, and they're not always as like, you can't put them on certain things. Like for example, you can't put an item frame on a fence gate and have a fish on it and have it look like this. Like you'd still have to see the item frame. It wouldn't look quite right. So that kind of stuff is nice to be able to use these. I call them vanilla plus mods because, again, like they don't change very much. They just kind of
Yeah.
give you some extra placement capabilities. I did the mini heads mod. I didn't grab a screenshot, but the mini heads mod is really fun because, or a data pack, because I've got a salmon fish head on the kitchen table inside, and so it really does look like a fish head
Hmm.
because very distinctly has like that salmon coloring to it, and that kind of stuff. Again, it's fun because you can put it on a table and it looks like it's there in part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, even in the rivers now, you have big salmon. You've got like the
Yes.
different scaling salmon. So the fact that they always come out as the same item size, like again, feels unrealistic somehow for Minecraft. But
Hmm.
that's just the way we got to work with these item sprites and everything. But yeah, I think those are looking really great. And I think it's interesting with the Firefly thing. I ran into the same problem as you, where I was not expecting the buzzing sound to be as present as it was when I started using Firefly bushes, and so I ended up burying a lot of them in my wheat field field when I added them to the survival guide wheat field. And so you still get the ambient sparkle of the fireflies at night, and you get a lot of them if you can concentrate a bunch of them in a large area, but then burying them under a block or making sure they have no air block above them gets rid of the noise. You just don't have them on the surface at that point. So it's a compromise either way, but I think it really does add atmosphere to those places, so I'm really glad they found a way to get fireflies into the game after all.
Also, burying them gets rid of the noise, but you still see the firefly effect?
Yeah, absolutely you do. Like it's kind of like hiding a spore blossom in places. You still have the green particles, even if the spore blossom is like covered up on all sides. So really useful way of concealing them, but still having the ambient particle effect in the area.
Cool. I knew you could do that. I didn't realize it would cut off the sound. That's cool. Because otherwise, if you had a lot of them, obviously it would be pretty loud.
Yes. Yeah. No. The amount I'm using, it would be cacophonous. It would be like the swarm of bees constantly. And I've already got a honey farm, so I have another place I can go if I want a swarm of bees. So what I've been doing this week, I've actually started moving forward with my plans for Misadventures SMP and when it comes to building, because after 1,000 unsuccessful attempts, literally 1,000 unsuccessful attempts at getting the skeletal wolf mount, I decided to just go ahead and get started on some other projects. I'm going back to Lost Crypt every so often, but I'm not going to make it like constantly everything that I do on the server. So I bought my large area of land finally. I forget the exact area of it, but we're talking like many chunks by many chunks. And the aim is to build this sort of abandoned sky town above it. I had this idea based on a couple of Skyblock bases I saw. There's a French server that the Instagram post kind of crossed my feed a couple of times, and they had a really cool looking Skyblock base that I'm taking a little bit of inspiration from, just in the way that they structure the houses, not necessarily in the build style, because I think there was a texture pack involved and I couldn't quite tell what was what, but much more about how you group houses together and things that share walls and short bridges connecting things and making it feel like a much more navigatable space than just a series of unconnected builds hovering in the air. And so right now this is feeling a little bit like a more advanced Skyblock build, but obviously I'm using resources here that I don't have a ton of access to, even in a regular survival world. Because of the resetting resource world, I can go and get all the red sandstone I could possibly want, as long as I feel happy going into the resource world every other day to check whether there's an available Badlands. So I'm using that as the bridging material, just kind of decor and bordering some of the bridges. And there are pathways made out of moss and a bit of jungle plank and things like that. And then the houses, I'm going for a more shaded approach to building them. I'm trying to use the different blocks as highlights, and it's really difficult doing this with anything that isn't grey stone. So the main house that I'm working on, and this is currently just in a creative build, you can sort of see that when I'm using like a regular sort of plain looking house, it's mostly stripped jungle woods. And to mix in with that, I've got things like mushroom blocks and mud blocks to go in with, like, or packed mud blocks to go in with the kind of shading, making things a little more on that pink-brown kind of scale, but not the brown that you get from spruce or oak wood. And around that, I've got a mixture of copper. I'm still using copper grates on some of the corners to make the house feel a bit more airy and hollow, and maybe hint at the fact that it's constructed that way to be lighter so that it can float in the air. And then around that, I've got bits of sandstone kind of providing a light kick on some of the corners to try and make it look like the sun hits it a certain way, and maybe those materials are faded over time, or maybe just like sunlight is hitting that particular thing when you don't have shaders providing the weather angle for the sun. And so there's bits and pieces going into this right now. I'm sort of tinkering with the build style and seeing what fits, but obviously a lot of them need to be materials that I can gather in bulk. So strip jungle wood I can get loads of very easily. The red sandstone is going to be primarily a highlight block, but it's connecting one of the builds that I made before that was kind of like a little storage room with decorated pots and stuff in it, and now that's got a bridge out to another section where a path leads around the side of a house, but it feels more like an area that you can explore. And what I want is for it to be something that people can head up there, explore, jump around. Maybe a couple of the buildings contain little challenges inside of them, little kind of parkour up through a building to get to another area of it, and make it something that feels like it's got a spirit of exploration about it, even if it doesn't feel like the sort of sky ruin that I had initially envisioned for it.
I really like the use of copper and red sandstone together. Obviously, it makes sense. Like when you think about it, it's like, yeah, two would go great together, but they're not the easiest blocks to get in normal survival situations, right? At least not at this scale. And so it's really cool to see them together. And I like the effects of like the combination of dripstone and then using red sandstone into a wall and then an acacia fence. And then it looks like it probably like a candle on top of that.
Yeah,
Like
orange candles. I've been
yeah,
taking a leaf out of BOO's book lately. He did a lot of stuff on the Hermitcraft Nether Hub this season with white candles going together with all the diorite he's using for those kind of giant arches, and it gives the impression that either stuff is sort of gently falling from the build, or like it almost feels like it's being assembled from code or something, with all of this stuff kind of hanging in
right.
the air, like the Matrix style, and I kind of like that. And so in a couple of places, I've used orange candles just as like an ornament for the top of what would be like a fence post. But in other cases, I've got little bits and pieces of kind of sparkly glass coming down from the bottom of it to emulate this notion that some magical power is keeping it aloft. But I'm also using candles in some of the corners to create a bit more of that effect. So yeah, I'm trying that stuff out, and I'm not anywhere near as expert at shading and the material use as folks like B-dubs are, but I'm learning on the fly here, and I think I'm coming up with some good stuff.
Are you familiar at all with a loft?
No, I think the name is familiar, but I don't think I ever played it.
I think it just came out recently. I think I have a link in the live chat for our viewers and people that are interested to kind of follow along. But it's essentially like another survival type building game, but you're building on floating islands.
Right, yeah.
I think you can eventually drive yours around or fly yours around, pilot it around. Anyway, I only know a little bit from seeing like a quick review from some of the people I follow on YouTube, but seeing your floating city and your houses kind of reminded me of that kind of idea of like when you outgrow the island that you're on, you can then like build a bridge and connect it to a new one and
Right,
kind of
yeah.
go from there. And I like that idea and that freedom. And looking at your screenshot, like, do you have any plans to add more verticality? Like, are some platforms going to be higher than others? You're going to go upstairs or downstairs depending on where
Definitely.
you're going in space. Nice.
Yeah.
That's going to look really cool when it's all together and you can like walk underneath it and then go up and visit it. It's going to be really, really fun because it's such a different, I guess, approach because on the ground in Minecraft, like I spoke a lot this week on stream about like framing and path of the eye and like how I want to control players' view when they walk into the area. I'm assuming they're standing on the ground. Like I'm assuming they're not flying in.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's a combination. Like people are potentially going to be flying in, but when you're controlling the path of the eye, you're going to be controlling what they're looking at on the ground too. So like if there's a cool river, there's a cool mountain in the distance, like those are the kind of things that people are going to be looking at beyond your buildings when they're walking down one of your paths or your roads. And so it's just a different opportunity and a different way to approach something like that. It's really cool.
Yeah, I think some of the paths are only going to be accessible by going through the buildings, so I don't want to build like staircases and things everywhere. And maybe there's going to be maybe little parkour stairs that are just a series of floating blocks off to one side, but
Nice.
I don't want to just make it like a series of pathways with houses between them like it's a village on the ground just lifted into the air. I want the space to feel purpose built for it being an air civilization. And so
Yeah.
a floating bridge could lead out of the back of like the top part of a house and then lead to a whole separate section. So yeah, there's lots still in progress. Like I'm still in the early stages of designing this, but I'm trying to break the habits of designing something like a skyblock build and everything being kind of on one plane, right? Like that's the difficulty.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it looks good. Like, and I think it's got that potential. Like, it doesn't remind me of Skyblock, other than just the fact that it's in the air. Like, that's the only comparison. Like, it looks really unique.
Yeah, the plan is also to try and avoid building it all on terrain as well. Like, I want it to feel structural first and foremost, and not just be a series of floating islands with things built on them and like rope bridges connecting them. Like, it's a different kind of aesthetic. Like, the architecture is the floating part of it rather than it being, anti-gravity islands. So, yeah, that's the plan. The tricky thing is that it's going to be built on a server where we don't have access to Elytra, because nobody has either built a dungeon that gives us access to that yet, and we don't have the structures that spawn in the resource world or the overworld, so we can't access the end at all. So I'm going to find a way to get up there, maybe through a water stream, bubble column, scaffolding, whatever it happens to be. The eventual goal will be that you have to climb a nearby mountain and then jump from there to the series of bridges that connects everything. But there's sort of a landing point that you can jump on and explore the rest of it from there. But we'll see how that shapes up. It's going to be a fun challenge in the meantime, and I have lots of other stuff I want to get to on Misadventures. I'm wrapping up Craft Mine on my YouTube channel as well. I've got one episode left of that, and really, I'm just ticking off a bunch of boxes, trying to speed run my way through some of the levels to try and get hold of some more keys to unlock this labyrinth of rooms that seems to be unfolding in the hub world. I've got a little bit further with that now, and I'm feeling quite confident that I've got what I want out of Craft Mine, even if I haven't finished every possible objective. For the completionists out there, I'm sure there'll be more that I could do, but it's been really fun exploring that, and I'm really looking forward to getting back into Survival Guide once Happy Ghasts arrive.
Are there going to be Happy Ghasts in the server with the Sky Island? Are you guys updating, or is it staying on the older version?
I don't think we've had that conversation yet, and that's really up to the admins, because there are a lot of bespoke mods being created for this series, just so we can manage, the land claims and some of the custom dungeon stuff that's involved. So I don't know for certain whether or not Happy Ghasts will eventually make it to the server, but I think the server is going to be around long term, so I'm crossing my fingers, because they would be perfect for the aesthetic of this area, and they're not quite as changing as Elytra when it comes to seeing stuff from the air. I think that's part of the reason we're withholding Elytra for now, is because it changes the way you travel and you can see stuff from above, and it sort of changes your perspective on the stuff that you're building, and keeping everything grounded literally is a good way of making sure that everything gets built with a kind of cohesive feel to it and everything feels connected. Yeah. So for now, we're going to move on into the news, because we've got a bit more news about the Chase the Skies update being on its way. 2 more pre-releases came out this week. In fact, pre-release 2 for Minecraft Java Edition 1.21.6 was published while we recorded last week's show. It came out on June 2nd. The article for this one reminds us that the Chase the Skies drop is getting closer, and the pre-release schedule might include more than one pre-release per week. So the changes in 121.6 Pre-2 are under Music and Sounds. Friendly Creatures has been renamed to Friendly Mobs, and Hostile Creatures has been renamed Hostile Mobs. In technical changes, there are more tweaks to dialogue, specifically the dialogue description format. We're putting the details of this, we're going to keep those on the Minecraft.net changelog if you want to go and check those out, since they don't make a ton of sense when read out loud, but there'll be links to the changelogs in our show notes if you want to go and check those out. Notable bug fixes in 1.21.6 Pre-2 include unsigned books written in 1.9 Pre-1 or earlier not upgrading properly, Ender pearls unexpectedly coming to a halt, players not being able to move while touching a Happy Ghast's body, Happy Ghasts with player riding teleporting back and forth when exiting nether portals, freezing in powdered snow being very inconsistent and jittery, and Ghast and Happy Ghasts not taking damage from harmful blocks under some circumstances. There's a handful of other bug fixes in the changelog as well if you want to go and check those out, but that's just a taster of some of the refinements that are being made now that Happy Ghasts are almost on the way. Pre-release 3 for 1.21.6 was published Wednesday, June 6th. That just adds a single change, which adds a new sound volume category called UI for sounds played by UI elements like button clicks. In addition, technical changes, the datapack version is now 80, which adds a player sheared equipment trigger, which detects when a player shears off shearable equipment from an entity, in case you're doing any custom stuff with that. Also updates the /play sound command to support the new UI sound category. Notable bug fixes in pre-release 3. The entity shadows of Happy Ghasts and Ghastlings were too small in relation to the size of their models. That's now been fixed, along with the sheer brilliance advancement being incorrectly given by shearing a lead off a wolf. Subtitles no longer showing when the master volume is set to 0, a couple of crash fixes, and a bunch of other fixes related to the new dialogues. As always, if you want the full details of these pre-releases, we'll have links to the Minecraft.net changelogs linked in our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So it feels like we're getting pretty close to what will be the release of Chase the Skies, and I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I feel like getting some hands-on experience with vibrant visuals and seeing how the Happy Ghasts play out is going to be really interesting to talk about on the show. What are your thoughts on the upcoming release?
Yeah, I'm excited for it as well. I think it's going to be the great time for me to get back into Survival Guide. I think Happy Ghasts work really well with my Windy City project and a couple of the other kind of floating builds that I've done. And yeah, I think there's nothing huge to pick out from the pre-releases at this point, which is a pretty sure sign the update is well on its way. We were initially speculating that they could get a release candidate out last week and then be targeting June 10th as the release date, but that's tomorrow at the time of this recording, and unless they push out a release candidate today and are very confident about things, I imagine it's probably going to drop on June 17th, next Tuesday. So yeah, we'll maybe get a pre-release during the show recording again, as happened last week. But yeah, chances are they're just fine-tuning the last few things, and we should have a full release next week.
Yeah, I would agree with that timing. I would imagine we'll see a release candidate either today or tomorrow, probably. My guess would be tomorrow, if not today. And there might be one or two others later in the week, depending on any bug fixes that need to be squashed. But I would imagine if we have not heard much by Thursday or Friday, then probably next Tuesday would be the release date.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, and that's kind of fairly timely, considering that when I was looking back through the dates of some of the previous drops and updates from the last year, so that we could talk about it in the main show discussion, Tricky Trials came out June 13th last year, so we're almost like, a full calendar year apart from that, and it made sense to discuss that on today's show, but also it makes sense that they'll be putting out an update around the same time, because we're talking like school holidays, like going into summer, a lot of people having more free time, and a lot of people getting hands-on experience with the newest Minecraft features.
Yeah, I can see a late September, early October, December, March, June. I can sort of see that rotation going through. And I guess maybe, what was it, March and April? No. When were the other dates? They were closer together than I was anticipating.
Yeah.
It was
October, December. There was like a really short gap between bundles, because it was a very small kind of feature drop, really, and it was hardcore for Bedrock Edition, which had been worked on for ages before that. But then it really wasn't long before we got hands-on experience with Pale Gardens, right? So
right, yeah.
that was like a 6-week gap or something like that, whereas I'd expect it to be a much more regular rhythm of like every 3 months we get something new at this point.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me as well. How do you feel about the changes for the UI?
Yeah, I think the UI sound effects are probably one of the more intrusive things that you don't have much control over now. Like, I think they're really just in master volume when it comes to changing the volume of those. And I think there are even resource packs, like Vanilla Tweaks has a ton of resource packs that change the volume of specific sound effects to be less obtrusive. And like nether portals and things like that were difficult to separate out from just the major blocks category. And so I think UI being its own slider is really great. I've definitely done that thing where you load up Minecraft, you forget how loud your headphones are, and then the first thing you hear is like a massive click when you like click on, multiplayer to load up a server or go into the options or something, and it kind of flinches you a little bit. So I think it's nice to have that slider as an option for people who find that sound a little bit I guess aggressive sounding. I'll probably be lowering it myself, but I like to customize a lot of the volume stuff just to suit whatever headphones I'm wearing, or like what sound effects I expect to be hearing the most. Like if I'm going out gathering grass blocks, you better believe I'm turning down the blocks slider. And then recently they made the change where a lot of grass block breaking sounds are quieter, and I'm very happy about that. So it seems like giving players more options in this respect is always a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. I have not found the menu clicks to be overly offensive, but I also have a lot of other things in the game controlled with, as you mentioned, data packs from Vanilla Tweaks, like quieter ghasts, quieter nether portals, quieter fire is another one.
Mm-hmm.
I also have personally changed the sound of the grass breaking to the dirt sound. Somebody on stream this weekend said, like, why do your leaf blocks sound like dirt? And I was like, what? Oh, it's because I've removed the grass sound. So anything that Minecraft uses the grass sound for, including leaves, sounds like dirt. And it's just such an inoffensive little, when it happens, compared to the grass. And what happened was, as you said, I was clearing a lot of grass for the modern city, the Southport build on the server, and it was just monotonous. Like I needed to change it because it was just too much. When you're clearing off hundreds of thousands of blocks of grass to flatten an area for a modern city, it was too much to take. So more control is good. And I'm curious if people could turn it up. Like if you're hard of hearing, it might be good to have the menu things up versus down.
Yeah, absolutely.
compared to other things in the game.
So you really know you've clicked on something at that point. Yeah, like it makes sense for sure. But that's really it to cover for the pre-releases. Not a whole lot left, but to wait for Chase the Skies to at least have a release date, which hopefully if they're announcing pre-releases and release candidates, they'll probably drop a release date in the changelogs for one of those. So we'll keep a lookout for that. And in the meantime, we're going to move on into chunk mail. As always, if you'd like to email the show, the listener email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Send us an email if you've got anything you want to discuss about the world of Minecraft. Keep it short and sweet if you can. It really helps us include those in the show more easily. And this week, Joel is going to read this first one.
First email comes from Trollfaust from the craft mine to the inventory. Hi, Jonny and Joel. I was thinking about how Minecraft's April Fool's update has sometimes laid the groundwork for future game features. The craft mine tinkering around with unlocking inventory and the recent changes to the GUI backend, I think we might see some more upgrades or improvements to inventory management in the near future. What do you think? Are we going to get some unlockable inventory in vanilla Minecraft? Trollfaust was blown up by a randomly placed TNT while looking at the skill tree in Craft Mine. So I feel like this is something that you could probably identify with, Pix.
Oh boy, I know that feeling, yes. Once you unlock all of the stuff in the skill tree of Craft Mine, and once you unlock a lot of the mine ingredients, the chances of survival do not really change all that much because not only are you better geared up, but you are more likely to be jump scared by TNT lighting near you at a moment's notice. And I just unlocked the one that basically constantly makes it stormy. But it's not just the fact that it's constantly stormy. The lightning does not stop. Like, it's constantly summoning lightning all around you. You can't hear anything else. I have the weather slider set to 1% volume, and somehow it's still just this hum of lightning the entire time, plus occasional damage ticks from you getting set on fire. So yeah, there's certainly some stuff I don't want them to unlock for vanilla Minecraft when it comes to craft mine, but I do like the notion of this. I've definitely seen in the past how the Infinity Snapshot, for example, was basically a really big test of custom dimensions that they made available for creators through data packs and things like that, so that people could really customize the criteria they want custom dimensions to spawn with and tack them onto a vanilla world instead of having to set up a whole separate server for you to jump to if you've got a multiplayer experience that has custom dimensions built in. And I imagine there's a few things that they've learned from even the wackier experiments like the one block at a time update and things like that, where there's no way they're going to do anything as extreme as remove inventory entirely, but they definitely have some stuff that players must have enjoyed about that they're taking into account, like how tactile the game became and how many features like that could be adapted for vanilla Minecraft. I don't know quite how much there is to learn from Craft Mine, because despite the fact that it's reformatting the game as this sort of adventure mode roguelike kind of thing, it does have a lot of stuff that is really part of the Minecraft experience already, but just viewed through a new lens. And it's not a lens that really lends itself to turning back to vanilla Minecraft and saying, how can we implement that? Like, the locking inventory is what they're talking about, where you unlock an additional row of inventory each time you upgrade yourself on a skill tree.
Oh, okay.
I can't see them implementing that in vanilla Minecraft because it would feel too frustrating. You've played Stardew Valley in recent memory, and I think that's another example of a moment where it's an incentive to progress, basically. Like, you buy upgrades for your backpack to expand your inventory in that game, but before that, it feels like your inventory is being intentionally limited, and I don't feel like it's that fun. It feels like a chore that you have to get through in order to have fuller access to the rest of the game. But I think from a Minecraft perspective, having less inventory at the start and unlocking more doesn't feel all that interesting to me. It didn't feel like a fun mechanic when I was interacting with that in Craft Mine. And even if it meant expanding the existing vanilla inventory and unlocking a fourth inventory row, I don't think that would feel great to just not have it to begin with. So yeah, I'm curious if they would ever implement something like that in Minecraft. My instinct says probably not.
No, I would agree, and I agree with your assessment of the early days of Stardew Valley as well, because it's supposed to be kind of like this sandbox RPG, but like you have such limited income at the start, and you don't feel like you really have a choice but to spend your income on your inventory. Like you can't, like the first thing you need to do because of the gameplay restrictions is expand the inventory. So it takes there's an illusion of choice. Like you can spend this gold on whatever you want. No, you need to expand your inventory. I'm worried this game is just going to take forever.
Yeah.
Right. Or feel really tedious as you walk back and forth between different shops and whatever, collecting things because you can't hold enough. And that I found was definitely my experience as well. I'm not familiar with Craftmine, but I was thinking about this, and I think that we're definitely due for some changes to the inventory UI. But I was wondering if we'll see more incremental changes in the UI in the same way that we've seen incremental changes to player movement and to things like projectiles, when it comes to bow and arrow and things like that over the last few months. Because breaking UI changes into pieces like that would do two things. One, you're not going to overwhelm players with a lot of change, resulting in a blanket, we don't like this, don't change it level of feedback. And if you focus on just one thing or a theme of things that are changing in the UI, you'll get more focused feedback from players. Like rather than saying, we've changed a bunch of stuff about the AI, what do you think? Players are going to give you feedback on what you did, what you didn't do, and what they think you should do. Whereas if you're saying like, we've changed the position of the crafting book in the UI, what do you think? Well, the feedback you're going to get is on that change.
Yeah.
At least, or the majority of it, right? People are still going to share their opinions about other stuff, but I feel like that would be a more interesting way to do it, and certainly a way with less friction as far as the player base, because people have been using this UI for ages, and when you change stuff like that, like it changes muscle memory, it changes all kinds of stuff with how people interact with the game. So I'm curious to see whether they implement anything at all to see if they can bring it over, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult to say that the Minecraft inventory system is perfect, but it is at least incredibly familiar to people who in some cases have been playing this for 15 years or more at this point. Like Minecraft turned 16 last month. So yeah, I really don't know what they can do in terms of an overhaul to inventory, but incremental change would really have to be the way they do it. But yeah, it could be interesting to see if we're eating our words in the next 18 months, if they end up implementing something from Craftmine that really turned out to be a valuable lesson. We'll see. In the meantime, let's move on to our second email from Kokura Daki, a landscape artist member of our Discord, who wanted to ask, will Minecraft Earth return? Hi Pix and Joel, what are your thoughts on Minecraft Earth getting relaunched in the future? Should it return? And if it does, how do you think it should improve on the original ideas the game was experimenting with? I'd love to see more variants of existing mobs like the Muddy Pig and the Moo Bloom. Personally, although I understand why the game had to be shut down, I was a little disappointed about it. I'd only recently started playing it at the time, and never really got to mess with it much beyond collecting handfuls of blocks while I was out and about. Thanks for the fun show. Kokorodaki pointed his phone into a cave and was shot by a skeleton inside.
I don't have a lot of thoughts on actually relaunching Minecraft Earth as it was. But something that I've been following a lot lately has been AI and AI news. And as new technology and form factors come into play, I feel like a Minecraft Earth-like experience could be on a distant horizon for Minecraft in general. As tech gets better, it gets more responsive, physical hardware gets lighter, and things like battery life improve. I can see things like Minecraft VR gaining ground. Then recently, Google and Android XR announced that they're bringing Google Gemini to a glasses form factor. So it's not Google Glass over again, it's something else entirely. But in order to do that, the processing power and the battery life of these things has to be something worth wearing and moving around, and like going out on an errand for several hours without having to recharge your glasses. Now, the example that they gave, it's very limited. It's like a heads-up display on like maps or people's names and things like that, information that you might need, social media. But if you expanded that to be a larger display, something that can do augmented reality, imagine playing something like Minecraft Earth, but instead of interacting with your phone, you're seeing an augmented version of Minecraft Earth through your glasses, pair of sunglasses, whatever you're wearing. So you don't have to be moving around with your phone, looking at stuff through this phone lens. You'd just be seeing it. Now, whether or not you'd be using your phone to interact with the world and build stuff in a Minecraft Earth-esque like experience, or whether your glasses would be able to see your fingers in front of you, pinching and zooming and doing different things and moving blocks, I don't know. But certainly as processing power and cloud services and AI and all those things get better, it's definitely something I can see gaming getting on board for. And I think that might be where augmented reality games start to get a little bit more mainstream, where it seems a little bit strange now just kind of using your phone for it. But when it comes into things like a headset or something as simple as putting on a pair of glasses, I could really see that being cool. One of the things that I've heard from people that have reviewed the Android XR experience is that Google Maps is a ridiculously cool experience because you get to, instead of looking down at the path on your phone, you can see the path at your feet. It's like following footprints, like in a video game. So that kind of stuff I could see in Minecraft being really, really cool. Imagine walking down the city street and you're dealing or you're playing Minecraft Earth, and all of a sudden you see little patches of mud. And if you follow that around the corner and then you just see like a muddy pig hanging out in an alley, just kind of looks up, snorts at you, and then you go on your way, or you go over and pet it or whatever. Like just little things like that would be really, really fun and funny. And I don't know if they'll ever catch on. I don't know what the form factor would look like, but I could see that happening. Now, whether or not it's going to come back as Minecraft Earth the way that it was, I don't know. But that's where I can see these technologies and the longevity of Minecraft. I can see Minecraft at some point attempting to adopt some of these tech developments to see how it works in Minecraft.
It's interesting because I think there's maybe a philosophical conflict between the image Mojang has as a developer, maybe distinct from Microsoft here, but the kind of things they're interested in promoting versus that vision of an AI augmented or AR experience where you're being encouraged to see the world around you in an artificial light versus taking what you learn from Minecraft as a game that you play in your home and then taking it outside to interact with the world on a more compassionate level, right? Like it'd be interesting to see if they'd be behind something like that, or if they would consider it more like you should be learning a better stewardship of your environment from Minecraft rather than ignoring your environment in favor of a virtual one. So there'd maybe be a bit of interesting conflict there that wasn't present as much with Minecraft Earth, because I think the core statement of Minecraft Earth was kind of get outside and meet up with other people and play it together,
right?
Which obviously became the downfall of it because of the pandemic and the difficulties that people had meeting up and the danger of people meeting up. But yeah, like as far as relaunching Minecraft Earth as a product, I can't think of many other examples of a game relaunching like that, especially with apps. I think that's one of those things where if an app doesn't have its day for whatever reason, if it's not sustainable for a variety of reasons, and I suspect finances were also partly to blame, there not being an easy way to monetize Minecraft Earth sustainably at the time, but also maybe thinking long term. It's difficult to imagine it relaunching and that being any different, and I don't think many instances have happened like that in the past unless the game's rights were bought by somebody else and it was relaunched. And in some cases gets relaunched against the creator's wishes. Like thinking about, I think Flappy Bird had an issue with that, where the creator withdrew it from sale and said, I didn't want people to completely consume their lives with this game and find this source of like rage and irritation, so I removed it from sale. And then I think a bunch of people tried to copy it and ended up like in a big rights dispute over it. So yeah, I think Minecraft Earth as a concept has not necessarily had its day, in that they'll never explore mechanics like this again, but I don't know if Minecraft Earth as a product is what they would eventually settle on, which is why I think it's really interesting that you've got alternative ideas for that. But like a re-release of Minecraft Earth at this stage would have to keep up with new Minecraft features, and we're 6 years on from the original like pre-release launch of Minecraft Earth. So at the time, I think it was working with Village and Pillage as an update. That was 1.14, and we're now 7 updates on from that, and we're just talking major version number increases there. So I think it'll be an uphill battle for it to reach modern Minecraft standards, even if the technology has improved to support the battery life issues and the augmented reality stuff. I think it would be a lot more difficult to sustain Minecraft Earth going forward with the current development cadence of Minecraft. Not to mention, it potentially means hiring new people or diverting resources from the existing Minecraft team, because I'm pretty sure Minecraft Earth was developed in-house. Like, it was an original Mojang product rather than being outsourced to another developer the same way that they had help with stuff like Minecraft Legends. So,
Right.
yeah, I think maybe Minecraft Earth as a concept is an interesting one, but one that will sort of remain part of the game's history rather than them trying to leverage that later on, further down the line. I think it's much more likely that they try and take Minecraft into new spaces rather than revisiting places they've already been.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Well, we're going to look at places we've already been for the last year, in fact, because I wanted to take a retrospective on Tricky Trials, now that, as we mentioned earlier in the show, it's about a year old. Minecraft 1.21, the base 1.21, Tricky Trials, originally released on June 13th, 2024. I thought this was a great time to reflect on its update, its impact to the game, but also on Mojang's new approach to development since then, or actually beginning slightly before then, with gameplay drops. Because if we take a look at a quick timeline here, the Armored Paws update was 1.20.5. That was released April 2024, only a couple of months ahead of the full release of Tricky Trials 1.21. After that, in June, we had Bundles of Bravery in October. That was 121.2. The Garden Awakens in December as 121.4. Then in March of this year, we had Spring to Life in 121.5. And then finally, Chase the Skies is currently unreleased, but we presume June 2025. So we have had incremental decimal point releases since Tricky Trials, all of which previously would have been taken up with bug fixes and occasional feature tweaks and things like that. But really now we're seeing these not as add-ons to Tricky Trials as an update, but just as add-ons to Minecraft as a game. They're not really connected to the same theme that the Tricky Trials update was. So to start with, let's have a quick look back at the features of Tricky Trials, what we've found has endured over the last year and the stuff that we're still interacting with, and maybe what's left a little bit by the wayside. Why don't you kick us off, Joel?
I have not yet been inside of a trial chamber.
Really?
A year later.
You've had a year, but obviously you've had other priorities.
No, I have. I've been in one just in the game for screenshots for the title cards for the podcast, but I've not actually in the Citadel gone to find one and gone into one in survival. It's on the list because I realized recently that I'm really low on copper, and so I'm probably going to go find one, have the gameplay experience, and then when I'm done with it, I'm going to mine it out and just have copper for days. So that's the plan there. I'll add it to my to-do list, which is as long as my arm now. But I was looking back at the features of Tricky Trials, and for me, it was about the tough and the copper updates, like the new grates and the tough variants and bricks and all of those things, stairs and slabs, especially for tough, really helped me a lot in West Hill. Like, those are things I immediately was able to put into cliff faces and buildings and foundations and swamps, and like I found uses for all kinds of stuff in Tricky Trials, just not the actual adventure gameplay part of it. But I think that part of that is, of course, because I am on a long-term project in a forever world, and so I had other priorities, as you said, and that's probably why I didn't go into the trial chambers. Not that I think that they aren't cool. They certainly look cool from the screenshots that I was taking, but yeah, so that's where I was with it. Is I was more focused on the new blocks and new building elements of, actually a lot of these is kind of where I landed in terms of the adventure stuff was kind of secondary for me. I still think it's all cool, especially talking about it on the show, but it's just for my actual gameplay and what I'm doing in Minecraft for me personally. If it was a building block or a new thing to then place down in the world, like a bush or a firefly bush, then like that was my focus of the updates I found.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think the copper variants, tough variants, and the crafter have been the features I've interacted with on a really regular basis. Like, I've been to trial chambers plenty. I've taken down trial chambers both for resources and just to take a look at the structure as we broke them down and see what's like hiding behind some of the walls, or like how the rooms fit together, and deconstructing things so there's just the trial spawners so that we can build stuff around those. But I think generally day to day, I'm looking at copper grates and going, why weren't these in the game sooner? I have not used the copper bulb quite as much as I expected to. I think it's still really useful as a redstone component, as a T flip-flop. I think the main thing is the different light levels are a really fun addition, but the fact that they come with different copper oxidation stages means that they are difficult to use in a build palette without really precise planning for what color you want that light source block to be and the relevant light level that accompanies it. You know, you can't plan for a prismarine build to be super well lit by copper bulbs, because the ones that actually match that color palette are the oxidized or the extremely weathered one, the kind of greeny blue ones, which provide really low light. And so you're going to have to supplement that with sea lanterns if you want the full kind of ocean monument style experience. But there's like little things like that have kept me away from the copper bulb until I know exactly what I want to use it for. But yeah, trial chambers as a structure, I think, still have some appeal to them, but I'm also not the kind of player who just wants to hop from structure to structure looking for stuff to raid and that sort of adventure experience. Once I'd seen one or two of them, I was pretty happy, and having explored a bunch and got the loot that I wanted, that was really it. I think some people will still get huge mileage out of turning them into custom dungeons, a la Decked Out from Hermitcraft, and, you know, having the option to mess with trial spawners that way. But I think the trial spawners make the most sense in the context of adventure maps and curated experiences where you're tinkering with that stuff on a creative mode level, when you can mess with the parameters of the trial spawner to spawn wave after wave of mobs, and that's a custom thing rather than a survival thing, so a little outside of my typical way of interacting with those mechanics. But I appreciate the fact that they're added. I can see their potential, even if it's not potential I'm interacting with myself personally.
Yeah, I landed on the same sort of idea. You know, just seeing those kind of things in the game. It's something for everybody, right? Like, and I think that's something that I've been able to pull from looking at all of these updates over the last year, is that there seems to be something for everyone. Not in every update, but certainly over the course of the year. There was like a little bit of a shift from adventure to building. There was a technical thing with the crafter. Like, so over the course of the year with the 1, 2, 3, 4 drops that we got, there was something for everybody across the year. And I think the nice thing about that is that those people that were maybe not as impressed with one update didn't have to wait 6 months to a year for the next one. They were able to just like, oh, okay, well, I didn't get necessarily all that I wanted this time, but like they're already talking about the next one. Like, very quickly after a drop is released, snapshots start coming out for the next one. So if you aren't super stoked about what's happening now in Minecraft, like, just hold your beer, because it's gonna come down the tube sooner than later, right?
Yeah, I really think the Garden Awakens update introducing the Pale Garden was a really great example of that, because it introduced a bunch of blocks and a mob that had surprisingly technical uses, and that was kind of 6 months after Tricky Trials came out. So after we'd had the crafter, which the sort of innovation in redstone, and so many other things you could do with it besides just automated crafting, which I think was a real surprise to a lot of people. But now you've got the creaking, which can function as an eye tracker, and the creaking heart can tell you whether it's day or night in a different way to a daylight sensor. And there are so many little technical things disguised in these larger updates that also introduce wood for builders, and a cool biome for people to find, and a different ambience to build in or to explore. And so, yeah, you end up with a lot of those features, even though maybe some of the interstitial updates like Bundles of Bravery, bundles are those things where you can take it or leave it. I think they'll be useful to everybody if you're happy to mess around with it, but they don't have a ton of like redstone interactivity, for example. You're going to find that those and the updates that just introduce a few more plants into the game aren't going to be the highlight for technical players, even if there's new resources to farm to get hold of them and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting seeing these as not really expansions of the Tricky Trials theme, in the same way that you could tack anything else onto say like Trails and Tales, where a lot of it felt like disparate features. In fact, it felt a bit like the direction that they were headed with gameplay drops anyway, but they didn't have that structure ironed out for it yet. So armor trims, trail ruins, things like that could all have been introduced individually as the sort of drip feed of features that we're getting now with these incremental decimal point updates, and I think it would have worked just fine. I even think that the wild update could have been split into a deep dark drop and then a mangrove swamp drop, and people would have been equally happy with both. And maybe the allays even as like a separate thing, because they're not really related to either. And I wonder if that would have been received better than the wild update, when people were kind of confused about what updates look like after Caves and Cliffs, and the deep dark having been on the back burner for a while, and yeah, just a little bit of a lukewarm response to what actually added a lot of long-term excitement to the game. But as far as Tricky Trials goes, just to wrap up a couple of other highlights for me, I think the new paintings are an underrated change. I think they're fantastic. I've only just started tinkering with them for decoration because I haven't done a ton of stuff with interiors before this. But for visual variety and also for the difference in canvas size for a few of them, they really fill the niche that I think Minecraft had been missing in terms of decorative art. So was really happy with those. Recently, I've seen wind charges and the wind-charged potion used for some pretty dramatic innovations in player transport. There are now Elytra sort of player cannons that if you use the infested potion, which is also part of the XP farm meta now, you create a bunch of silverfish spontaneously, splash all of those with wind-charged, kill them all simultaneously, and that leads to an enormous wind-charged explosion. That means a player gets shot across about 3,000 blocks in the blink of an eye. And provided you don't collide with anything on the way, then that's a way for me to get from my spawn point almost to the Windy City in the overworld without having to worry about the Nether. And obviously in the Nether, it could go even further than that. So I think there's really interesting stuff coming through with the meta. I think people were interested in farming slime and cobwebs through the other potions, but those have now, I think, just kind of slowly transitioned into the background compared to some of the stuff like Wind Charge that people are still finding interesting uses for 12 months on.
Yeah, I think that some of the things that have come out of Tricky Trials has been really advantageous. I even forgot about the crafter, and I've done some work with the crafter, and I really enjoy those changes. I was looking back and thinking about the other drops as well, which I know are not like part of Tricky Trials or added to, but became their own thing. But I feel like, to your point about the wild update, that the drops that we've got recently they live up to their name better. Like it's a little bit more concise. Like you just, spring to life. You get what you expect when you read that title. The update makes sense, and I think that's one of the things that Mojang has been able to take advantage of, is like with the smaller drops, the name of the drop is a little bit more focused, and then players are less, I want to say misled because that sounds nefarious, but like there's less confusion about what's to be expected in the update, and I think, or in the drop, and I think that's something to be said as well, in that it's become a smoother landing. In terms of the drops, like, were there any that stood out to you? Like, do you have a favorite? Do you have things that are like at the top of the list, bottom of the list over the last year?
I think honestly, Armored Paws I've interacted with the least. Like, I've seen armadillos around, and I've interacted a little bit with wolf armor just for the sake of having it, but it's never felt like a number one priority for me. I think we predicted that fairly early anyway, because you and I are not really like pet people in Minecraft, and like tamed wolves are not really part of our usual gameplay. We're not like the adventurous type exploring with our faithful hounds, so that was always going to fall by the wayside a little bit. I think Bundles of Bravery, again, was a take it or leave it update, but I would absolutely take it because bundles have been my thing for a really long time, so I can't help but have a soft spot for that. But obviously, Garden Awakens, I think, is the highlight, really, because of how concise it was and contained, but how many features it added to so many disciplines of the game. The amount that you can do with creaking now, even like a couple of updates on, like small changes got made to the creaking in the meantime that have arrived in more recent updates, and I think it's nice that you now have name-tagged creaking that you can use in specific ways, and that functionality's been expanded a little bit. But it's added pale wood, which has been a big request for a while to have a white wood type. And the biome itself, like, I still think feels really well done. It's the kind of thing where playing on Misadventures, I kind of miss it. And we've added a backport version of it to the Misadventures mod pack recently, but even then it feels like an earlier prototype version. They've not got all of the most recent features of it in that backport, so the polish that they've been able to achieve with some of those things is really felt now when you're looking at the sort of pale imitation, pun intended, of the real thing. So I think that's probably been my favorite. I think Spring to Life has a bunch of stuff that I will continue to use long term, but it's hard to get too excited about new foliage, even though it's what we want as builders. We want all of those little details and micro blocks and flowers that you can put 4 of in the same block space, and like things like that really do add life to the world. But I think, like you said earlier, because my world is a long-term one and I don't get all of that stuff generating directly where I started, it's going to feel like it introduces itself gradually and intentionally to my world. Like, I have to be in charge of putting that in the places where I'm going to see it the most, rather than starting a new world and having it all available on my doorstep.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the features are New World heavy. You know, like bundles, Wolf Armor. Like, there seems to be a lot of stuff that's focused on people that start the game over again quite often. And I think that's where I personally just don't have a lot of interest in that stuff. So as you mentioned, like Armored Paws and actually Chase the Skies, both of them are kind of at the bottom of my list, because I mean, Chase the Skies doesn't add any new blocks at all outside of the dried gas. So for me as a builder, like, not the most interesting
Sure.
for my personal projects. As a Minecraft player, I still think it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, in general, but like for me, what I'm actually doing and what I can see myself spending time in over the next few months, I don't see Chase the Sky as being big on that list. And same with Armored Paws. And I think that Spring to Life is actually the one that stands out to me, not just because it's the most recent, but I think it's because, again, for me personally, I've just been doing almost as much landscaping as I have been doing building in West Hill, and to have that much added in terms of foliage and different things in the game really open up a lot of possibilities, to the point where, like, I've got ideas that I just still haven't implemented yet in terms of the Spring to Life update. So those are the things that kind of stand out to me. I also feel like, you know, over the last year, the steady march of snapshots and new features has made talking about Minecraft really interesting. Even when it's not something I'm going to be partaking in myself, it's still really cool to see these changes. It makes for really interesting conversations on the podcast, and it makes for a continual conversation on the podcast. Like, we're not usually seeing lulls that last weeks as we come up to a release of a major update, as people are not playing as much. They've got ideas, but they're waiting for the big thing to happen. We just see stuff like we talked about earlier today, where, like, oh, this is pre-release 3. We'll maybe expect a candidate this week and then potentially a release next week. And you're like, oh, well, that's hardly any time to wait. That's barely even a podcast episode, right? And I feel like that's something I've noticed, is that I don't know about you, but like, I feel like we've been busier since Minecraft has been doing drops, as opposed to the longer waits between major updates. And I think that that's become clear to me, just as someone that does a podcast about Minecraft. And I'm wondering, though, in terms of like the drops, like, what have been like your drawbacks for the drops? Like, what would you say are not the best things about them?
Well, first of all, I fully agree that it feels like there's always something new coming to Minecraft these days. It's like there was 3 months of the year previously where there was no news, and I think that's an interesting change. And I'm not entirely certain that it's all good, because I spend less time in vanilla Minecraft these days. And I think that's for a variety of reasons. I think a lot of the time it's down to my own creativity and different projects and plate spinning, and right now being kind of drawn into other games, because I've been playing Minecraft for so long that sometimes I want a bit of a break to blow the cobwebs out. But I'm wondering if the amount of content in gameplay drops is also contributing to that. And it's perhaps because I make tutorials, but when, say, like the Village and Pillage update dropped, I remember spending probably a full week just talking about villager workstations and the crafting mechanics that they added, and fun ways that we could use stuff like that. Just the surface level features I remember covering for about a couple of weeks before you even get into the nitty-gritty stuff, and like, how can we use grindstones for building, and how can we use this or that as a redstone component, and the redstone stuff you could do with lecterns and things. So there were, I think, broader feature sets like that. Being less focused still gave you a couple of weeks worth of Minecraft playtime where you were still uncovering all of it, right? And a week of Nether survival in 1.16, just to test out the new survival progression there and find all of the biomes and see what it was like to interact with that without ever touching the overworld at all. Like, that was a really fun time and a long amount of time spent in it. Whereas Spring to Life, I basically covered everything within it in about a day, and then didn't feel wholly compelled to keep going. Like, it wasn't like there were hidden depths to too much of it. And I could have strung it out into farms for every individual, new block bushes and firefly bushes and that kind of thing. There are definitely more depths to mine there, but it feels like smaller features require you to dip back into your own creativity and set your own objectives much sooner than just spending a week or two letting the update wash over you. and that's what we got with things like Caves and Cliffs or the Nether update, where suddenly the world was completely changed and you felt like you could immerse yourself in it a bit more. It feels like some of these things are wide-ranging changes, like being able to go find a forest that has leaf litter in it and wildflowers and things like that now. But once you've seen it, it's just a feature that's there. It doesn't have the same kind of immersion necessarily as something like a Nether update, but it doesn't have to. Like, these are smaller features that are being incrementally added so that Minecraft feels like a more modern game. They're adding value to older biomes that they can then go back to and trickle this kind of content into to make it feel like the newer biomes aren't outstripping them in terms of quality and interest. And that's a good thing for the health of the game long term, but as somebody who's been playing for a while, it feels like I have to fall back on my own ideas a lot more than I used to, and playing for a week or two, experiencing everything that was in a major update, felt like it gave me the momentum to continue playing that often from there. So I think maybe that's the bad side of it, and it's purely a psychological thing and probably based in my identity as a Minecraft content creator, is that, once I've done a sort of scavenger hunt for all of the stuff in Spring to Life, I have to get back to business, and there's not really a whole lot in there that compels me to do something new.
Yeah, I think my saving grace has been the larger projects, like has been the iron farm for 6 weeks or the West Hill for 4 years. Like, I mean, there's obviously smaller projects within West Hill, like the fishing farmstead or the road textures or the inside the keep, the bedrooms and stuff like that. Like, there's always something, but I feel like I would say that I agree that, when you get a drop, you can very quickly get through the content of the drop. And one downside, I think, as a result of that is also there's just less fanfare around them. Like, people are not talking about them for as long. They don't have as long of a tail as a major update does. And I think that it might be a symptom of that larger project, where if what's coming in the drop is not something that really pertains to me as a creator, as you mentioned, and as someone that's working on this large project, then I can just kind of see myself not even bothering with it. And like, I might update to it for 1 or 2 features, but there was definitely a point this year where I skipped an update because, now granted, I'm running a vanilla plus modded server. And so when an update drops, I have to either wait for and or track a whole bunch of changes for mods and then update those before I can update to the new drop cycle. And if they start happening really quickly, like we mentioned between Bundles of Bravery and when the Creaking came in, like I think I skipped it. I just waited because it was just too much of a pain to go and update all these mods that I just updated a few weeks ago. And so I find that part a little bit frustrating in terms of the frequency. Like, that's the only downside. I mean, I think getting more stuff more often is great for a lot of players, but I kind of wonder, like, as they are adding more to Minecraft more frequently, and Minecraft just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like at some point, there's just going to be things that some players are just not interested in. And I feel like, while that's not a bad thing, it feels like a bad thing when you write it down or you say it out loud, right? But as a player, like if you're still getting all the things that you want to get out of the game, then that's fine. The fact that you are not interested in Leaf Litter, for example, doesn't mean that no one is. It just means that it's not something that you want to, explore and use in your builds.
That's an important perspective to have, as well as like looking at other people's perspectives outside of our own and recognizing that there's going to be something in these for everyone. But I the main issue I still see pretty widely discussed is whether Mojang has sidelined major updates permanently. I think that's the other kind of major talking point around maybe the negatives of the gameplay drop format, is that the more cynical folks in the community have moved on from joking about 1.19 being the mild update and have now moved on to talking about in 5 years' time when we're on 1.21.43 or whatever, right? Like they're kind of they're sort of assuming that this is just the version of Minecraft now forever and we're just getting incremental updates instead of it being version 1.25. And I think this is certainly not the case, but now we're 1 year on from our last quote-unquote major release. I do wish we had some proof that it was going to be still like there were still going to be major releases. And for some people, I feel like this gets into trivial waffling about version numbers and when like one number goes up versus the other number going up. But I think some people still want there to be, larger thematic updates on par with things like the Nether update. And I would expect that Mojang themselves are still working out what a major update looks like when a lot of these features that would pad out a release to be a little bit unfair to them, because often they are highlights for people, but like all of the little side features and quality of life changes and stuff happening in gameplay drops means that they can't be additional features supporting whatever the main theme is. But those now being released individually means that for there to be a major update, it probably has to be something like a dimensional overhaul. It has to be something like an end update or something beyond the Ancient City portal. And the good news is, if that's coming, it means really exciting times for a major update. The bad news is those things take a lot of time to get right and they have to live up to the hype. So there's going to be a lot of time in the oven at Mojang for those updates before they really get a chance to see the light. I just wish that there was a sign the developers could tap every so often to say major updates are not gone. I feel like that would be nice, because I feel like occasionally I'm having to do that, but then I don't really have any proof to fall back on besides they did tricky trials right after the Armored Pause drop started, and so that was clearly the beginning of the minor update, major update cadence changing, but we haven't had news of a major update even since then.
And what are they going to call them? Like, are they going to make it just as confusing as changing updates to drops, or vice versa? Like, are we going to be calling them big drops? At which point, why did you change it from being called an update? We could have just called them big updates and small updates. Like, just I still, and I'm sure I've done it today, interchange drop and update in conversation on this show. And I think that part of the problem is that they've just used something that's got multiple meanings, and you use it in language so often, and especially when it comes to software and games. And I think that that's become challenging and a little bit confusing. I think they've achieved the expectations. Like, I think players, I think, now know what to expect from a drop, what size it's going to be. I think that they know that it's going to be a little bit more focused. I don't think there's any incorrect expectations there. I do still find it confusing in terms of like drops versus updates and version numbers and all that kind of stuff. Because again, like, we've not had any communication from Mojang on that. I do think that they would benefit from leading with the names of drops earlier. Like, I don't think there's anything about Chase the Skies that would have been misleading. The moment that they announced a Happy Gast, call it Chase the Skies. And that way you don't have to release the soundtrack on Spotify with a weird name. You and I can talk about it. Other players can talk about it as Chase the Skies. I think that it inspires more and gets people more excited about it than it does to have this, like, we have to talk about this drop for the next 3 or 6 weeks until it gets a name, and we can't call it anything but a drop. And I think that it would really help if they just called it something, or it, like, just decide the name early and allow those things to be part of the marketing and part of the conversation, rather than leaving it so vague until the very end. I think that's doing more, I don't want to say harm, but it's not doing them any favors, I don't think, in terms of the confusion. I think that I don't know, the major updates, I agree that I think that they're going to be big swings. I think those are going to be the things that take a long time. But I think that they have an opportunity there as well to they could just treat it like a big drop. Like they could still have the kind of things, like the kind of quality of life and the kind of bug fixes and things like that go into all the drops that we're seeing, and move on from there. Like I don't know if that's it's hard to tell. Like it's so hard to speculate without more communication from Mojang. And I think they've done a really good job, as I've said, about communicating the drops, but then they need to also communicate about whatever these updates are going to be.
Yeah, I think that's a good note to leave it on, though, is that drops have brought so many examples of Mojang being agile and responding to player feedback. And Armored Paws was really the beginning of that, which put the Armadillo and the Wolf Armor through several different iterations, both visually and functionally. But then you had Bundles, and the Pale Garden and the Creaking clearly went through several rounds of player feedback once they were confirmed as additions. And it didn't necessarily stop people from talking about the update and sharing that feedback to not know what the update was called yet. While I definitely agree it helps to know the name of something so we're not getting confused about version numbers and whether it's a drop or an update or what to talk about it, if we have a name to talk about it with, that certainly makes things a little easier. Not to mention the fact that I think Bedrock had a hotfix that has maybe separated the version numbers again, because I think they had a 1.21.60 hotfix at some stage because they needed it. And so, yeah, I think having a unifying update name does make sense. But in the meantime, I think they're communicating all of the other aspects of this so well that it really deserves mentioning in this discussion of how drops and updates have kind of changed the way that we're looking at Minecraft these days. And if folks at home have more opinions about that, of course, feel free to write into the show. It would be really interesting to get some more discussion going ahead of the Chase the Skies drop finally arriving. But we'll cross our fingers and we'll have news for you next week about whether or not that's happening. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, please consider putting some value back in. You can do that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, where you can talk to the community about what you've been doing in Minecraft. We have a bunch of different channels, all available for various levels of chat, from the technical to the builders to the more general, and even a handy resource mine where you can go looking for links to useful tools that'll help you get the most out of this game. We also have monthly hangouts, and our quarterly hangout is coming up as well, where we'll be talking about how the podcast has been performing across various platforms. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons, Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude. That said, we currently have 284 patrons, which is up 4 from last week, and we'd love to add some more as the weeks roll on.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. You can find us at The Spawn Chunks on social media. New episodes are available on Mondays on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. The video version goes out on YouTube, and then slightly after that on Spotify. So you can find us a couple places for video. You can find the RSS feed linked at thespawnchunks.com. The patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That is where you can find the extended version of the podcast. And if you'd like to write in, the email address is spawnchunkmail@gmail.com.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by PixelRiffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/PixelRiffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide will be returning once the Chase the Skies drop is here, and I'm in the meantime doing stuff on Misadventures and the Craft Mine update. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for the aforementioned YouTube series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at PixelRiffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe podcast, available on all of your favorite podcasting platforms. There's a new episode out where we talked about Sinners and Thunderbolts. I have not seen Sinners yet, but we did see Thunderbolts together, Stephen and I, so we talked about that at length. Also some Lego chat in there as well. So that was a fun episode. 494 right now, available everywhere. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find, and Joel Duggan on Twitch, where I stream Tuesday through Saturday, and lately it's been an awful lot of Minecraft, so tune in for the finishing stages of Westo.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, and these trials are still tricky.